Creating a Life of Magic, Big Magic. Something like this. There was once a magician on a cruise ship who performed mainly sleight of hand tricks. He had a regular spot on the ship's cabaret evening entertainment, and he was actually quite good as a magician, but he had one big problem. His routines were regularly ruined by an onboard parrot who would fly around squawking and giving away his secrets, saying things like, "It's up his sleeve, it's up his sleeve," or "It's in his pocket, it's in his pocket," or "It's in his mouth." The magician was getting pretty sick of this and threatened to do physical harm to the parrot if it ruined his act one more time. Then, one evening, right as the magician was about to disappear in a puff of smoke for his grand finale, the ship hit an iceberg and it sank in seconds. Amazingly, the magician and the parrot were the only two survivors. The magician was lying on a piece of driftwood in a daze. As he opened his eyes, he could see the parrot staring at him out of his beady little eye. The parrot sat there for what seemed like an eternity, just staring at him, the wheels of his little brain turning and turning. Eventually he said, "Okay, you got me this time. What did you do with the ship?" Okay, so not that kind of big magic, but big magic nonetheless. And we're going to use the brilliance of Elizabeth Gilbert's most recent book, Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear, to explore our attitudes, our approaches, our habits that are needed to uncover our hidden treasures, face our fears, and trust the universe, all of which will lead us to our most creative, magical lives, the lives that Spirit intended us to live. Early on in her book, Elizabeth Gilbert poses a very important question, and it's a question we're going to explore this morning. On page 8 of the book, she writes, quote, "So this, I believe, is the central question upon which all creative living hinges. Do you have the courage to bring forth the treasures that are hidden within you? Look, I don't know what's hidden within you. I have no way of knowing such a thing. You yourself may barely know, although I suspect you've caught glimpses. I don't know your capabilities, your capacities, your aspirations, your longings, or your secret talents, but surely something wonderful is sheltered inside of you. And I say this with confidence because I happen to believe that we're all walking repositories of buried treasure. I believe this is one of the oldest and most generous tricks the universe plays on us as humans, both for our own amusement and its own amusement. The universe buries strange jewels deep within us all and then stands back to see if we can find them." End quote. That sentiment is consistent with an ancient Hindu story of the Creator and the angels discussing where to hide man's divinity. So one angel said, "Put it in the bottom of the ocean, they'll never find it there." And God said, "No, humans are very smart. Someday they will find their way to the bottom of the ocean." Another angel said, "Then put it in the center of the earth. I suspect one day," God said, "I suspect one day man will find his way there too. We need a more obscure spot." Another angel suggested the top of the highest mountain, but God felt sure that man would find it there as well. Finally, an angel said, "I've got it. Let's put it in a place they will never think to look, right inside of them." The treasures that we are to unbury is the unique way in which we are supposed to express our divinity. Back to her, Elizabeth Gilbert's passage. Quote, "The universe buries strange jewels deep within us all, and then stands back to see if we can find them. The hunt to uncover those jewels the courage to go on that hunt in the first place, that's creative living. That's what separates a mundane existence from a more enchanted one. The often surprising results of that hunt is what I call big magic, end quote. So let's be clear about something right up front this month, because I don't want 3/4 of you to tune me out thinking I'm not talking about you. When I say creative living, we're not talking exclusively pursuing life as a poet or an artist or a musician, although that could be, the treasure hidden inside of you, and that's wonderful. Rather, creative living in the context of our conversations this month is about living, one, a life that is driven more strongly by curiosity than by fear. Two, a life in which you bring forth from you that which brings you joy and fulfillment, which in turn blesses the world, because there's no such thing as private good. So I'm going to say it again. Creative living in the context of our conversations this month isn't about artistic endeavors. Rather, it's about living a life that is driven more strongly by curiosity than fear, and a life in which you bring forth from you that which brings you joy and fulfillment, which in turn blesses the world. So even if you're not an artistic or an artist or a singer or a writer or an actor, or fill in the blank for creative endeavors, this month is for you. Got it?
Yep.
Okay. So beginning on page 9, Gilbert gives the example of her friend Susan, who took up figure skating when she was 40. Well, actually, she already knew how to figure skate. She had figure skated competitively as a child and loved it, but she quit the sport when it became clear that she didn't have the chops to be a champion. For the next quarter of a century, she didn't skate. Her thinking was, why bother if you can't be the best? Then when she turned 40, that milestone birthday can mess with our heads, can't it? She was listless, unsettled, out of sorts. She did a little soul searching and asked herself, when was the last time she felt truly light, joyous, and even creative? And to her amazement, she realized that the last time she remembered experiencing those feelings was when she was figure skating. And even though she was saddened that she hadn't felt that way in a long time, she was curious to know if skating would still give her those feelings. Again, what is the definition of creative living in the context of this month's talks? Living a life that is driven more strongly by curiosity than by fear, and a life in which you bring forth from yourself that which brings you joy and fulfillment, and which in turn blesses the world. So she followed her curiosity to see if that which at one time brought her joy and fulfillment would again. She bought a pair of skates, found a rink, and hired a coach. She ignored the voice within her that told her she must be self-indulgent and preposterous to do such a crazy thing. After all, you are 40, She acknowledged and then ignored her extreme self-consciousness of being the only middle-aged woman on the ice with all those tiny, feathery 9-year-old girls. She just did it. 3 mornings a week, she got up before dawn, before her demanding job began, and she skated. She skated just for the sake of the joy and the freedom and the fulfillment she felt when she skated. She skated because it made her feel alive. About her friend's experience, this is what Gilbert writes on page 11. It was a quote, it was a revolution, a literal revolution as she spun to life again on the ice. Revolution upon revolution upon revolution. Please note that my friend did not quit her job, did not sell her home, did not sever her relationships and move to Toronto to study 70 hours a week with an exacting Olympic-level skating coach. And no, this story doesn't end with her winning any championship medals. In fact, the story doesn't end at all, because Susan is still figure skating several mornings a week, simply because skating is still the best way for her to unfold a certain beauty and transcendence within her life that she cannot seem to access in any other manner. And she would like to spend as much time as possible in such a state of transcendence while she's still here on earth. That's all. That's what I call creative living, end quote. I think that's kind of beautiful, don't you? So the question this morning is, what treasure is buried inside of you? There's one thing you should know about uncovering it and going for it. It can be scary. In fact, it can be very scary, because living creatively means living into the unknown. And moving into the unknown is scary. I always said that, we humans, we are happier to be comfortable in our uncomfortableness than to try something that we don't know. So here's the many ways in which we might be afraid to uncover our buried treasure, and you can see if any of them are true for you. You don't have to acknowledge it. You're afraid that you won't be any good at doing whatever it is that's nudging you. You're afraid you'll be rejected or criticized or ridiculed or misunderstood or worst of all, ignored. You're afraid there's no market for whatever you're offering, and therefore no point in pursuing it. You're afraid somebody else did it better. You're afraid somebody else will do it better. You're afraid somebody will steal your idea, and so it's safer to keep it hidden forever in the dark. You're afraid you won't be taken seriously. You're afraid your dreams are embarrassing. You're afraid that someday you'll look back on your endeavors as having been a giant waste of time, effort, and money. You're afraid you don't have the right kind of discipline. You don't have the right kind of work ethic. You're afraid you're too fat. About this one, here's what Gilbert writes. I don't know what this has to do with creativity exactly, but experience has taught me that most of us are afraid we're too fat, so let's just put that on the anxiety list for good measure. You're afraid you will fail. You're afraid of what your peers and coworkers will say if you express your personal truth out loud. You're afraid of upsetting your family with what you may reveal. You're afraid your best work is behind you. Afraid you never had any best work to begin with. You're afraid you've neglected the treasure buried in you for so long that now you can't find it. You're afraid you're too old to start. You're afraid you're too young to start. You're afraid because something went well in your life once, obviously nothing can ever go well again. You're afraid because nothing has ever gone well in your life, so why bother trying? You're afraid of being a one-hit wonder. You're afraid of being a no-hit wonder. So because we don't have all day here, I'm going to quit listing the fears. It's a bottomless pit. We can just summarize it by saying that living creatively, finding our buried treasure, it can be very scary. But here's an important thought. Our fear is really boring. It never changes. It never delights. It never offers a surprise twist or an unexpected ending. Fear is a song with only one note, only one word actually, repeated at full volume on the endless loop. Stop it. Only we can stop it. We're equipped with the same basic fear package, all of us. There's nothing interesting or compelling or original about it. On the other hand, we each have creativity inside of us that is original. We each have a personality that's original. We each have dreams and perspectives and aspirations within us that are original. But our fears are not original in the least. Gilbert asks this question, quote, do we really want to build our lives around the most boring instinct we have, end quote. That doesn't mean your fear will go away. Bravery means doing something scary. The truth is, we need our fear. Nature set it up that way so we could react appropriately to being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, for instance. We need fear in order to protect us from actual danger. But we do not need fear in the realm of living creatively. In Creative Mind and Success, Dr. Holmes wrote, "Fear brings failure. It's just that simple." That was pretty straight to the point, wasn't it? Charles Fillmore in the Unity teaching said, "Fear weakens the viral life and the feet stumble." Just because you don't need fear doesn't mean it won't show up, especially when you're trying something new. Your fear will always be triggered by your new endeavors, whatever they may look like. Gilbert suggests that because fear will be your companion on the road of creating big magic in your life, you need to build a space for it. Here's what she writes on page 26, quote, "It isn't always easy or comfortable being on this road trip with fear, but it's always worth it, because if you can't learn to travel comfortably alongside your fear, then you'll never be able to go anywhere interesting or do anything interesting. And that would be a pity, because your life is short and rare and amazing and miraculous, and you want it to be really interesting and do interesting things and really make interesting things while you're here. And you have treasures hidden within you, extraordinary treasures, and bringing those treasures to light makes work and faith and focus and courage and devotion, and the clock is ticking and the world is spinning, and we simply do not have time anymore to think so small." End quote. I love that. So what do we do when we're faced with fear? Faced with the fear of even trying to discover our buried treasure. Well, our founder offered a very good suggestion, and so does Gilbert. In Creative Mind and Success, on page 15, here's what our founder wrote, quote, "Let us fill ourselves with such courage and power of strength that all thought of weakness, and I'll add fear, flees before us. If any thought of weakness or fear should come, ask the question, is life weak? Is life fearful? If life is not weak or fearful, and if God is not discouraged, then you are not, never were, and never will be. I should like to see the sickly, discouraged thought that could withstand the attitude of mind. No, life is strong, and you are strong, with the strength of the infinite. Forget all else as you reveal this strength. You are strong and can say, I am. You have been laboring under an illusion. Now you are disillusioned. Now you know, and knowing is using the law in a constructive way. I and my Father are one. This is the strength for the weak and fearful, and life for all who believe." End quote. Holmes is telling us to remember who we are. So in conclusion this week, Gilbert offers some wisdom in the form of a conversation she has with fear every time she begins something new. And it goes this way, and I'm going to close this with it. Dearest fear, creativity and I are about to go on a road trip together. I understand you'll be joining us because you always do. I acknowledge that you believe you have an important job to do in my life, and that you take your job seriously. Apparently your job is to induce complete panic whenever I'm about to do anything interesting, and may I say, keep doing your job if you feel you must. But I will also be doing my job on the road trip, which is to bring faith and focus and courage and devotion to my work. And creativity will be doing its job, which is to remain stimulating and inspiring. There's plenty of room in this vehicle for all of us, so make yourself at home. But understand this, creativity and I are the only ones who will be making any decisions along the way. I recognize and respect that you're a part of this family, and so I will never exclude you from our activities, but still, your suggestions will never be followed. You're allowed to have a seat, and you're allowed to have a voice, but you're not allowed to have a vote. You're not allowed to touch the road maps. You're not allowed to suggest detours. You're not allowed to fiddle with the temperature. Dude, you're not even allowed to touch the radio. But above all else, my dear old familiar friend, you're absolutely forbidden to drive. Remember, you have hidden treasures within you, extraordinary treasures, and bringing those treasures to light is what you came here to do. And the clock is ticking, and the world is spinning, and you simply don't have time anymore to think small. It is what God in you, as you, is you, wants for you. And I affirm that knowing this, believing this, that you have the courage not only to discover, but to express your buried treasure. That's my talk today. It's a great book. I should have probably ordered some from the bookstore. All right, so time to do our prosperity affirmation. It's in our program. So please join me. With a joyful and